it's sort of like Abraham Lincoln said, you can fool all of the people some of the time, some of the people all of the time, but you cannot fool all the people all of the time. But many experts think they can, and they're making a mistake.
So Chris has his master's in organizational management or organization management?
Organizational management.
Organizational management. Tell us what that is, Chris.
Well, it's really rooted in, for example, management theory started with Peter Drucker going back many, many decades. And it really all boils down to like, how can people within organizations, because every organization, what is it? It's really groups of people that come together to get something done. How can we work together more effectively? And what really excited me about this particular degree was that it recognized human needs and respecting the humanity of one another, while at the same time improving performance and teamwork and clarity on goals.
That's cool. So that actually dovetails into what we're actually going to talk about today, which it's a little psych out for our audience. It sounds like we were about to go there, but actually the reason why I wanted to have Chris on the podcast is because Chris has a company and specifically software that he's developing called VaxCalc. And we're going to dive into what that is in just a second here. But I've had the pleasure of getting to know Chris over a few phone calls, and we've just been talking quite a bit about his story and what led him here. And I thought this is actually a podcast episode to talk about the story. So with that, let me just say you are a software engineer, and you've been baking this product yourself for how long now?
Well, it started back in 2009 as a volunteer project for the National Vaccine Information Center. And I was at their international conference, and it was an amazing conference. Like today, they tend to be bashed as, anti-vaccine, but what they really are is they stand for informed consent, where people have the right to understand the risks and make a free choice without compulsion. And the thing I saw a lot there, but one of the things that just blew me away was that all these people who were deeply knowledgeable about vaccines had the hardest time knowing what ingredients there were inside of the vaccines. And someone had mentioned that they whipped together like a little mercury calculator, but there's so many other ingredients that it's important to understand. I just had to decide, this light bulb went off. It's like, this sounds like a perfect thing for like some kind of software that you can rapidly know not only what is in any vaccine, but also when you go in, if you get your child gets 3 or 4 or 5 shots, you want to see the totality of all the ingredients and whatever is known about the research on those particular ingredients. And finally, there are very, very few safety standards. We have them for mercury, very few for aluminum, but all the other ingredients, there are no individual safety standards, like how much is it okay to consume, how much is okay to inject. And so that's what created the idea for VaxCalc, that big gaping mystery of what exactly are we putting into our bodies.
Wow. On the surface, it sounds like this should have been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Like when I think about grabbing the packaging of any consumer product in the supermarket, I can see what the ingredients are in it.
Yes.
And these are millions and millions of products.
Yes.
Why do you think it is that this is such an unknown for people? I don't even know if people's the right thing to say. Should I say, is it an unknown for consumers? Is it well known by doctors, the ingredients? Like, those are two different questions. Let's attack one at a time.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So why is it unknown? I think because it's disturbing when you look at it. And if it was really easy to find, then there would be even greater resistance to vaccinating your children.
Wow. So
Yeah.
that leads me to the question: are you yourself an anti-vaxxer?
Oh, wow. No, I actually started off I would have serious. I'll tell you a quick story. I started off vaccinating my kids without thinking about it, just assuming that this is the thing to do.
Me too.
Right? It keeps them safe. Yeah. But when I went around interviewing pediatricians, something started to bother me. All right. And what bothered me was everyone that I talked to was telling me about, the Hep B birth dose. Oh, when your daughter's born, you bring her into the office the next day and she'll get the hepatitis B shot. And I would ask them, well, why? This is a little confusing. This is not a communicable disease. So, and why would we want it so soon? I mean, the risk of it interfering with breastfeeding, which is really important, that baby mom bond. And, I didn't get any straight answers. With some of them, this kind of wall came down and they seemed kind of cold and clinical.
Doctors you were
speaking
to?
Doctors, both men and women. One lady said, well, I would have to report your refusal. And I've never heard that before. I was like, what? I mean, you're talking to me like I'm in middle school. What do you mean report my refusal? Who are you reporting this to? Another doctor who I like very much, and who we stayed with, very great deal of empathy, a very sensitive, caring, knowledgeable doctor. He told me a number of risks, like, well, she might get bit in daycare. She might need a blood transfusion. And I was just sitting there scratching my head. And I told him, I was like, Dr. Fox, I mean, do you think that's really likely? I mean, she's not going into daycare, so we can just get rid of that risk right there. So, like, what isn't being said here? So I just felt like someone wasn't telling me something, like there was a truth being withheld, or they were just trying to get me to do something without full disclosure. And I just stayed in the back of my mind, and I shifted from almost complete trust to what's going on here.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I'm kind of like a bulldog with mysteries, like or like a dog on a bone. If I feel like there's something weird going on, I have to. It just bugs me until I uncover it.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's some of the engineer in you too, like finding those bugs and figuring out exactly.
Yes.
That it's a scientific brain.
Right.
So that's pretty interesting. So right then and there, you started to sense the need for risk assessment. You were starting to do your own risk assessment.
Absolutely. And that's the most natural thing on earth for a parent to do, risk assessment for your child. And when things start getting a little contentious, with a doctor who's, insisting that your unease is unwarranted, trust just starts going down the drain.
For sure.
Yeah.
So now, what did it take from there for you to start this project? Tell maybe this is a good place to segue into, what does the product do? I know that it's evolving, and we can maybe speak to a little bit of that. But just for our audience, describe what it does. What do you get when you sign up with us? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Would it be okay to step back into the anti-vaxxer question?
Yes, sure.
Yeah,
sure.
There was two points I wanted to make additionally about that, because I do know some people who classify themselves as anti-vax, and it's really important to address this. Most of the people I know who would say, yeah, I am anti-vax, they started off very pro-vax, and they had a negative experience with it, either themselves or their children. And that moved them along to not all the way to anti-vax, okay, but it upset them. There was some kind of injury done. And then what pushes them to anti-vax is when doctors deny what happened, when they say it couldn't be the vaccine, or when they get mocked as being like unscientific or stupid. So that kind of dynamic of complete unacceptance of what someone has seen with their own eyes, and making them trying to make them feel dumb, is what really pushes many people over.
Wow.
And one last thing about anti-vax, I just want to just say it's really important to understand, like, organizations like the National Vaccine Information Center, which today is considered anti-vax in the press. When I went to that conference in 2009, they had people across the entire spectrum. Okay, they had a doctor from Africa, a pediatrician, who said, I'll never forget this. It just kind of just blew my mind. He said, I can totally get why many parents here in the US have concerns about vaccines and the number that you're getting all at once. But my God, don't take them away from me in what I'm doing in Africa, because it's like the only thing we have.
Wow.
Yeah. And see, that's the kind of integrity organizations like NVIC have, and is absolutely hidden away and not appreciated today.
So you saying that and tying back to your comments about how people become anti-vax from this pushback that they get, or mockery or whatever.
Yes.
What do you think that comes from? Like this, we're talking about science, and traditionally science is looking at evidence.
Right.
And what is it? The Hippocratic Oath, where to do no harm. Mm-hmm. Like these doctors are first. I mean, obviously, I don't believe that doctors get into the field to have power or be nefarious, or like, what is it what is it in that culture? How did it grow to a place where we would have this issue, where people would have any kind of weird communication or interaction where it starts to become uncomfortable with doctors? How did that happen?
That's an excellent question. I've thought about that for a long time. I think there's a lot of dimensions to that. And in fact, I talked a little bit with that pediatrician who we really like, that Dr. Fox. Over the course of about 5 years, he started to express frustration with some of the younger parents that were coming in, because they were questioning him on everything. And he was spending so much time trying to field questions about vaccine safety and splitting up the vaccine, spacing them out. And I think the thing that's really important to understand, that doctors don't really work for you today. They work for the insurance companies. They have very limited time, and they have compliance rates that they need to keep up in order to get the maximum amount of insurance reimbursement. And not only that, but if their vaccine compliance rates with their patients drops too low, they're going to get investigated by the state health departments. So they're under a great deal of pressure from all ends, from who's paying them, from who is regulating them, and from the parents that don't want everything. They want individualized healthcare for their children. And if you think about it, that is like the most common sense thing on earth, because every child is different, and parents are going to have different experiences and different health histories. And the idea that one size fits all anything works should have been shed a long time ago. One size fits all diets don't work for everyone. One size fits all shoes don't work. One size fits all education doesn't work.
For sure.
And what we've seen in communism is one size fits all causes a great deal of harm. And to continue to fit everyone into a one size fits all can only lead to tyranny. There is no other way.
Right. It's through the removal of the individual, and
right. Exactly.
Versus the individual. So you said something that I am not educated about at all. So I wanted to go back to it. When you said they have a compliance rate, what does that mean?
Okay, so it means that a certain percentage, like maybe at least 80% of their patients, the children, need to be fully vaccinated according to CDC schedule. And then the insurance companies will either give full payment, or even in some cases, like I think it might be Blue Shield and Blue Cross, will provide bonuses.
So you're saying that because of that standard set by the CDC, the insurance companies that payment is actually tied to this standard somehow?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's not just on the case by case individual level. It's like, you have a record with this insurance. As a doctor, you have a record with this insurance.
Right. Everything is
They're like, do you fit into our mold? Is it like that?
Yeah,
do you fit into our mold? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So if a growing number of parents are coming in, not wanting to be fully compliant, that's a financial problem and a regulatory problem for the practice. And that's why we're seeing more and more parents being kicked out of practices. Yeah, because it makes it a lot easier. And the thing is, like, I have some empathy for these practices.
Yeah,
I was contacted. Yeah, exactly. I was contacted just a couple of weeks ago by someone who had, one of the things VaxCalc offers is a geocoded database where you can find vaccine-friendly doctors near you. And they found one, and they contacted them, and they used to be friendly, but they no longer are, right? It's like fully vax or out. And it's because of all the pressure that's on them. And I know for a fact that practice wants to be more flexible, but that freedom to be flexible puts their careers at risk.
Wow.
And so most won't be.
This makes me want to deep dive even further into conversation about the free market and how health care could somehow get back into a competitive state. But that's probably outside the scope of this conversation.
Sure. I can offer one thought on that, and I'll keep it short. Something that's really missing from the mass vaccination system is checks and balances. Like, we all understand checks and balances from a political system. The executive overreaches, the legislators may push back, and hopefully they will. The judiciary may also get involved and push back. We have checks and balances, and it's been a big experiment for more than 200 years, and it's worked pretty well. The mass vaccination system has no checks and balances. Parents can no longer say, no, thank you, I don't want that. That's a check and balance that needs to come back, and it would improve our vaccinations.
Wow. Yeah, I could see that. Is that because it's just one of those things that's slipped under the radar because, hey, look, this is science, and science is complicated, and we as consumers are just like, I don't know, I trust my doctor on that. And it's like we just check out, and it evolved into this state. Were there ever checks and balances? Were there or does it take what's potentially happening now, where people are scratching their heads saying, what are my options? And then there's more, there's more pressure to have some type of accountability.
Right.
What do you think is the answer?
I think there's been so much faith, and I use that word on purpose, so much faith placed in vaccines that allowing free choice is probably perceived by the public health profession as very dangerous. That they're not in a position to allow backing off, because they're probably terrified that the back off would grow pretty quickly. And I'm not saying everyone would dump everything by any means whatsoever, but they probably view it as chaos, that every parent would choose their own. But if you think about it, that would be the free market system.
Right
there.
The full-blown conspiracy theorists would quickly say, well, yeah, it's big pharma that is, there's just so much money there. Don't right. They just own the regulatory system, or lack of regulatory? What's your opinion about that? Like, do you think that holds any weight, or do you think it's not that way, or is it some type of mixture?
Oh, it's at least a mixture. Big pharma has a huge amount of influence. And here's an example. Like back in 2007, when Gardasil was released, I mean, the HPV.
I know so little about this. It's going to be shockingly embarrassing to you.
No, okay.
So just treat me like I'm a fifth grader.
It sounds good. So HPV, it can be spread sexually, but you're not going to go to school, cough on someone, and give them
right.
HPV, right? Well, what Merck did was lobby many state governments, money to legislatures, to promote bills to add the HPV vaccine to requirements for school entry. This was not anything that was needed for Americans' public health. It's actually a lifestyle vaccine.
Wow.
And so so there's a difference. Like Hep B and HPV are lifestyle vaccines. Something like a vaccine for pertussis or, COVID. I mean, these are not lifestyle vaccines. These are for communicable diseases. So when people start to notice vaccine manufacturers paying lobbyists to get their product as a requirement for an education that you as a taxpayer are paying for, that's very problematic. That should be illegal.
Wow. Yeah, it does seem like that should be illegal.
Yeah, absolutely. So while there are certainly conspiracy theorists, pretty much every conspiracy has some kernel of truth that you can dig out. I mean, unless the person's just a complete madman, and then you don't even, you'll know that.
Right. So it really boils down to what percentage is it the way they're saying it is, or,
right.
Which way does this really tip?
Yeah. And it's going to be on a case by case basis.
Sure.
And the thing is, like, what's happening right now with with Biden's mandates, it's just throwing massive amounts of fuel on the fire. What we really need is someone who's able to calm things down in the midst of the fear on all sides. I mean, everyone's fear is legitimate. Turning a large group of Americans against another large group of Americans is the most irresponsible thing I think has ever happened in American history.
Wow. Divisive.
Very, more than that, dangerously divisive.
Philosophically, at a high level, and I think people don't always even go to this place of debate. Certainly not in a healthy way if you watch social media,
which I try rarely to do.
Same here.
Just to keep sane.
Yeah, it just
social media is like poison.
It seems like it devolves into very unproductive places very quickly. But what I was going to say is, fundamentally, it feels like part of the debate here is the collective versus the individual. Going back to what we were just talking about.
Interesting.
That some people, I know when I speak with people, they're like, yeah, I believe in individual liberty and the freedom of choice. But what if that person's choice affects all these other people? Right. And of course, all of our choices affect everyone around. Yeah. We're like a rippling outward. That's the definition of influence, right? We're all having an impact on each other.
Yeah.
Where do you land on that as it relates to public safety, public health? What does the argument, hey, someone else's choice not to get that vaccine, that might have a catastrophic impact on a whole community or something like that? How do you approach that argument or conversation?
Man, that's an awesome question. Because I was just talking to my dad about that on the way here this morning, because he's very much, Chris, why don't you get the COVID vaccine? And he's a microbiologist, a retired one, and he puts a lot of trust in the FDA, CDC. He loves Dr. Fauci. I think it's a lot more complicated than just like, hey, I get to do what I want versus, hey, do what's best for everyone. It's difficult to be open to taking a risk to do something that is you're being told will benefit the community when you don't trust the organizations or the people who are telling you this. So there's a real big trust issue. And I know there's been research into that, by CDC has done research, and maybe FDA. And what their research, their surveys will, they typically show, okay, is that, oh, well, they're spending more time on social media than with their doctors. And so social media, misinformation is the problem. So we need to censor. That's not it at all. It's so basic. If you want to be trusted, be trustworthy. And find out why you're not trusted. We would need more transparency. And then here's an example, like for the CDC, you wouldn't have someone who led the vaccine division then go work for Merck and get millions in stock. a lot of people look at that and you're like, and then you're telling us to take this experimental vaccine while these insiders are getting rich in that way. No way.
Right.
No way. People, look, here's the thing. People are a lot smarter in their choices. Even when you disagree with the choice, it is fundamentally American to respect different choices. I mean, that's the basis of of representative government, is to respect different choices, that the choice closest to the individual is what is most important to them. And they'll be most careful, even if our experts disagree. I mean, a growing number of people don't want faceless bureaucrats and unelected public health officials telling us how to take care of ourselves. I mean, I think there would be greater trust if there wasn't the one and only way to deal with this is a vaccine, because we know that's not true. Okay, we know it's not true. And America has done so many great things. We can certainly have a diversity of choices, and diversity is huge. Nature and natural selection loves diversity. There's strength in diversity. Putting 100% into just a vaccine will save us. What if it doesn't work? You want people with natural immunity. You want people trying Chinese medicine. You want people trying homeopathy. That is a little risky. That's like the risk of freedom, but it's also wise to be open to it and to be able to talk about it.
Well, every great, leap forward seems like it was preceded with some type of creative destruction, right?
Yeah.
Where you have this revolution of okay, we're going to try, we're going to fail, we're going to iterate, and that doesn't come without challenges, but there wouldn't have been a breakthrough without that part of the process.
Right.
And it seems to me like what you're saying, and I agree, is like the way to make informed decisions is the informed part.
Right.
So you actually have to lean into the process of getting good data.
Right.
Why is it tough to get good data? Why is that a difficult thing?
I want to just step back before I get into that. I want to step back and address what you said about the importance of being informed. I think government has a very important role in that. I mean, they did such a good job with smoking, raising awareness of smoking. And, they didn't go and outlaw smoking, right? What they did was they created safe spaces. Okay, you're not going to smoke in a building. Maybe you won't smoke right where everyone has to walk out the door. I mean, so inside of a public health crisis like right now, it would be wiser to say, well, if you don't want the vaccine, then if you can work remote, that's beautiful. If you need to go into an office, well, then maybe weekly testing, all that kind of stuff. There should be room for compromise, and government can play a really useful role in that. But from what we've seen recently, they just want to be the sledgehammer.
Yeah, it's kind of mind-boggling to me that it's gotten to that place as quickly as it has.
Right.
It seems like, I've been of the opinion for a long time that if you just study history, which, by the way, I think is one of the most powerful and important things that everyone needs to do, it's just part of growing, is truly study history.
Yes.
If you study history, I mean, power wants more power. Anyone in power wants more power. And it's pretty special circumstance when people voluntarily lay down their power. And
that is so true.
And so, you see this sort of evolution or toward gaining more power. And I guess the founders, of course, wrote about this and put a lot of checks and balances in place to try to slow this creep of power.
Yep.
It does feel like recently there's been a pretty big surge in the grabbing of power.
Oh my, yes. Anytime there's a crisis or emergency, I think there's a massive temptation, as awful as it is, okay, as awful as COVID has been, a massive temptation to exaggerate it, to make people even more scared. And in order to get that power, and also to do the things that people in power think would be good. So that's another reason for the distrust. And you were asking about data. I mean, just the other couple of days ago, I saw a leaked video from a hospital. I don't know if you've heard of this or seen it, but doctors were talking with their marketing director, and they were talking about how can they inflate the COVID cases. And it was from a Zoom meeting, and someone recorded it on their phone. So I'm pretty sure. I mean, some people may say, this is all BS, but it looks pretty real. You know, I'd invite people to just look at it for themselves. And so the marketing director said, well, is there a way that we can include the cases of people that are have recovered or recovering and gone home, because they are COVID cases. So they're trying to increase the number. And she explicitly said, it's really important to scare the public that if they don't vaccinate, they will die.
Now, what pardon my ignorance,
Yeah.
why would this hospital's marketing team, like, what is their incentive there?
That's a really good question. That is a really good question. It may be that what I lean towards in my more generous moments is that they believe that everyone vaccinating is the best thing to do. People aren't doing it, so we have to scare them and lie to them to get them to do the right thing. In a way, it's like threatening children with something that isn't so. But people aren't stupid. You know, people pick this stuff up. You kind of sense it. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like because it's not all about data. We have ways of talking with other people and checking various sources, and it's sort of like Abraham Lincoln said, you can fool all of the people some of the time, some of the people all of the time, but you cannot fool all the people all of the time. But many experts think they can, and they're making a mistake.
Well said. Maybe that's a good moment to transition over into learning more about your product and service. Sure. And like I said before, I know that it is evolving. But right. Tell us what are some of the benefits ultimately. So to catch the viewers up on some of our conversation, you've said, hey, look, this is it's in a rudimentary place. We have a lot of the good value is there. We need to make it look a little bit better so that people can more readily feel the value come to them. That's normal product development. And I've been really fascinated to be part of that conversation with you.
Thank you.
But tell our viewers, listeners, what are some of the services or benefits of VaxCalc?
The VaxCalc has really evolved into a few different things. There's VaxCalc, the research tool. And I mean, frankly, it can be a little overwhelming. As I've been talking with Jed about, it needs some user experience, because you can get into it and there's a lot of research. Really, it stems from so much that I had been learning as a volunteer for the National Vaccine Information Center. It was really important to me to somehow capture all that I was learning, you know, from the inside of their group, on my own research, and to easily make it available for as many people who want it. Because it's so frustrating to see everyone have to start from scratch in the research that they're doing. So there's VaxCalc, the research tool. There's also something called the VaxCalc Forum, which is a free online vaccine choice community for support and like all choices, whether you want all vaccines, some vaccines, or no vaccines at all. It's really just meant to be a community where there's no censorship, where we can share our experiences, share our worries, support one another. And it's designed to be free forever. We have about 900 people. You would just send an email to join@vaxcalc.org. Within 15 seconds, you get an automated invite, and you're good to go from there. We also have, and when I say we, it's me. Okay, like right now it's me part-time. But if you don't watch TV and you get up early on the weekends, you can get a lot done over X number of years.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And there's a doctor search service where some years ago I started to have this feeling like, there's all these wonderful vaccine choice friendly doctors lists all over the internet. I was like, they're going to come down. These lists are going to be pulled down, and people are still going to be looking for them. So I pulled those lists, archived them, and turned it into a database where you can find doctors and other health professionals near you. And there's a small charge for the service, and it's because you got to pay people to do the data entry, and so it helps people, it helps you find a choice doctor. And then let me see, I'm just looking at my notes over here. It's so easy for me to forget stuff. So I got that. And right now we're experimenting with, have you heard of Substack?
The phrase or the word, is it an app or a service?
Yeah, it's a uncensored platform for people to write.
Oh, okay.
And publish. So for example, the thing that has really made me feel good about it is, do you know Glenn Greenwald?
Educate me.
Okay. So do you remember Edward Snowden?
Yes.
Okay. So Glenn Greenwald is the incredibly courageous journalist who worked with Snowden to get.
Yes. Got it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Greenwald is all about freedom of the press. And he's come out and said Substack is a good place. He went to Substack. He's publishing from there because they don't try to censor you.
That's great.
Right? And he believes that yes. So anyway, we've just begun experimenting to see if we can get something like a subscription email service going. It's just there's free, like it's free, and then there's like a paid subscription where you would get other material.
That's cool.
I haven't figured it all out yet. You can see I'm kind of meandering a little bit.
And that's okay, right? This is part of the product design process is
right.
What do people?
The whole point of like everything I just said, okay, the whole point of VaxCalc is to help people make confident vaccine choices, whatever your choice is. And I just want to, if it's okay, I'm going to just read something to you from John F. Kennedy. And this is like the foundation, this is part of the philosophical foundation here for VaxCalc. On February 26, 1962, he said, "We welcome the view of others. We seek a free flow of information across national boundaries and oceans, across iron curtains and stone walls. We are not afraid to entrust the American people with unpleasant facts, foreign ideas, alien philosophies, and competitive values. For a nation that is afraid to let people judge the truth and falsehood in an open market is a nation that is afraid of its people." And so VaxCalc is really founded on that we are not meant to be a nation afraid of its people. And so VaxCalc takes like a very small space of freedom, because there's in terms of like vaccinating your kids, there's a very small space of freedom. And over many years, it is meant to empower parents to act like picky consumers that we are everywhere else in life, and to demand choice and thereby open that space of freedom wider.
Wow.
In the end, that's what VaxCalc is. My goal is to work on it the rest of my life, to build a small team and to have it last well beyond me.
That's amazing. I love what you're standing for. Beautiful words by Kennedy. That was like inspiring me. I have heard that once before, but it's been a long time, and it just feels so appropriate for right now, for these times.
Yes, it does.
And
that's who we are. That's who we are as people.
And it feels like we'll lose that if we don't take an active,
right,
be the active character in our own life story that we're supposed to be.
No, you're right. And I'll just say right now, based on what you just said about losing it, yesterday, Children's Health Defense, which is run by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., has announced an emergency campaign to fight the mandates. And what VaxCalc is going to do to support that, he's trying to raise $1 million by the end of, by October 31st. And so I'm going to send an email out fairly soon that 100% of all revenue that comes in between now and October 31st is going right to CHG's effort on this, because this really is critical.
Yeah.
This is absolutely critical.
Yeah. And, the point that you made about that it's actually going to take parents pushing back and saying, I don't, well, maybe I don't want that. Maybe my answer is no.
Yeah.
What kind of opposition should parents expect to face, based on what you've seen in your personal,
it's gonna be very hard right now. I mean, it's been very hard for a long time, but until we're beyond COVID, it's going to be doubly hard,
extra hard,
right? It's going to take a lot of courage. Parents are going to need to, and VaxCalc is designed to provide, that the big goal is to provide that courage. Like I get emails all the time from parents that are experiencing all kinds of issues, and that's why we started the online discussion area, the VaxCalc forum, is because by supporting one another, we get courage. By knowing that you and I are not alone, we get so much more courage. And one of the goals of the public health officials, and it's been this before COVID, okay, is for people who are thinking for themselves and making different vaccine choices. They want you to feel shame, isolation, pressure, and fear, because in those conditions, you are much less likely to make a choice that is important to you. And that's why we're working to pull people together so that no one is alone. And this actually goes deep down to my own personal faith. I mean, if you think about it, what is the only thing Jesus excluded? The only thing he excluded is exclusion itself. No one is to be excluded. No one, whether you want all vaccines, some or none. That's my personal faith. We don't exclude anyone.
Right. Okay. So philosophically, this is where you stand for even designing the tool. And
it is.
So when what's at risk here for our audience? Can you give a couple anecdotal examples of I don't know, data around if you've put these vaccines in order too close together? Do you have any particulars like that where people can say this is actually something you need to know, and you might not know anything like that?
Well, the first thing I would say that probably one of the most important things for parents to understand is that the school requirements for vaccination are going to be different from what your doctor is promoting. It's really important to know what those requirements are, and you don't need, just because your doctor says, oh, today we're going to do X, Y, and Z. You can always say, well, no, not today. I'm not ready right yet. That it's really important to get comfortable with just saying, not today. Oh, but that didn't really answer your question. I'm thinking, okay, in terms of, man, there isn't really,
and that's okay if there isn't. I just was curious if there's
there
stands out. I don't. Again, our goal in this is not to create extra fear or anything.
Right.
I just wanted the listeners to know that there's very real reasons, and I don't.
I have a good one to share. In terms of, there aren't any studies on like the whole schedule, right? So we don't really know, but there's you can use common sense, and it's always safer to take less than more, right? Even if you want all vaccines, spacing them out some. I mean, some of the smartest people I know wait till 2 months or wait till 6 months until the baby's a little more well-developed. Maybe you don't want to put 250 micrograms of aluminum injected into your newborn. That's something to look at and to consider not doing. My daughter has potentially fatal peanut. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, is it different? Like, is this even to something? Is it even to the degree where one brand versus another may have different? Educate me on that.
Yeah. So one thing that VaxCalc also does is, where there are different brands, it just puts them side by side, and you can see the difference in ingredients. Like, for example, with DTaP, I forget which brand, and DTaP is diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. Pertussis is whooping cough. If you choose one vaccine, you can get half the aluminum injected into your child than the other.
You were starting to say your daughter's peanut allergy.
When you ask in terms of some of the stuff that we know, if food allergies run in your family, I mean, it's really important to keep in mind that for decades, research into food allergies is done by inducing food allergy into research animals. And the way they do that is they inject the research animal with the pertussis toxin and aluminum, which is what is injected into children with the pertussis vaccine. It's been known for decades that vaccines can induce allergies. It's part of the risk of chronic disease. So in a way, some people have been saying we've been trading childhood disease, communicable childhood diseases for chronic disease. There really isn't enough research into that, and the few doctors that step up to that actually have the data and research on those issues on chronic disease, like this Dr. Paul, he rapidly lost his license for bringing that to the public.
Wow.
Yeah.
You've done a great job explaining philosophically where you stand in terms of giving choice and just good data. And although I don't know if I asked where your data comes from. Do you have multiple data sources, or is there just primarily one for like cases of this?
FDA approved package inserts is where we get the ingredients. And the amounts of ingredients, and a good deal of research on that comes from the CDC itself. For example, I have a PDF, and you can find this on their website too, because CDC has a ton of good information, and they've done a ton of good work on toxicity. So, for example, they found in researching on animals that injected aluminum has a half-life of 50 years. And that's part of the things that you would discover in VaxCalc. So we don't use weird research sources.
Okay.
You can get most of it from NIH, from CDC, from FDA. I mean, when FDA has when they do their meetings, you can get their slides and find out all kinds of things that are just to say thought-provoking. And oftentimes they don't understand. They'll come out and say in these presentations that the public really doesn't attend, that they don't really know the risks of a lot of what they're doing, but the public good of the vaccine is such that we should move forward anyway. And here's the thing: a growing number of people are beginning to be aware of that. And so, of course, there's going to be what's called vaccine hesitancy. Now, vaccine hesitancy, is a term that's slung around in the mainstream media or by the World Health Organization as a very, like a dangerous and negative thing. But when I hear it, I just think of, hesitancy just sounds like someone who's trying to make a wise choice.
Yeah, it's like I think of myself. You may not know this about me, but I have a license to conceal carry a firearm.
Yeah.
I don't carry one often, but I have that license. But when I look at a gun, I get very hesitant, even though I have those skills.
Right.
And I work at learning the best I possibly can. Like, I'm not willy-nilly with it. Like what was taught to me by my uncles, my father, is that you're supposed to have hesitancy.
Yes.
You're supposed to be careful, right?
Anything that's
you go through very clear-minded steps of safety and caution to deal with it. So, like you said, anything that's powerful. So I'm with you. I don't think that word should be as used as negatively as it.
Oh no! Right, actually, based on your feedback, when the first time we talked, VaxCalc has fully embraced that term vaccine hesitancy as something to be proud of and something that's important. And that's the people that that we love and serve. That's like our main customer.
I said a second ago, you're doing a fantastic job explaining the philosophy of how the product is coming to be. And I'm asking this question of Chris Downey now.
Okay.
Like this is the personal sort of.
Right. Well, this is all personal for me.
Of course it is.
It's not really all that different. But let's hear it. I'm excited.
It's all connected, but for you, as it relates, are there any specific vaccines that I think in the beginning you said you haven't gotten the COVID vaccine. That's one.
Yeah.
Are there any risks? Here's a particular question.
Right.
There's been just enough sort of undercover stories that have come out about people who say, hey, I think, or this data shows that some vaccines, or maybe the combination of them, may have led to the rise in autism.
Oh yeah, that's good. That's a great question.
Where do you, Chris Downey, land on that? That
Oh,
conversation?
I think that's absolutely correct.
Oh, you feel like
Yeah.
there's data around that?
Oh, there is. There's a vaccine court case where, gosh, I can't remember the little girl's name, but the U.S. government has compensated a family for vaccine-induced autism. And after the show, for the show notes, I can send you links. You can see the court decision. Now, the case itself is sealed. Like, you don't know how much they got. You can't see all the data because they need to keep it from the public. Now, the way that happened is that the girl's father is some kind of neuro something. I mean, he's a highly educated, deeply skilled doctor, and he knew what to check for. He knew what tests to do. He knew what records to keep, which is basically everything. Yes.
Well, that's such a good point, going back to the beginning about like how most of us, especially say me, standing in front of a doctor, if I'm educated on certain areas and I love talking about those areas.
Right.
And because of that, areas where I'm not educated, I just want to be like, I don't know, you're the expert.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, let me ask you this. I mean, do you choose what to eat?
Yes.
Okay. You don't wait for a dietitian to tell you.
Correct.
Right. So, I mean, it's interesting. In some cases, doctors are treated like a priesthood, and I think that's part of a problem too.
Wow.
It's like, oh, hey, I'm not a doctor, but you know what? But you're an expert in yourself and your children, and you need to find a doctor who respects that.
So that's the root of this, is that this is designed to give courage to people to be, and that's what's missing, right? Is, I have to tell myself, I may have to have courage for this next conversation that I'm about to have with a doctor or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And we have held off. You used that example earlier where we say, no, not for that shot, not today. I don't know anything about that shot, so I need to go do research or whatever.
Yep.
So that's a big part of this, it sounds to me like you're saying people need to intentionally develop that confidence.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I strongly encourage everyone to look at from multiple sources of information, not just VaxCalc. I mean, we go to CDC site, look at their information, judge it for yourself. That's the really important thing to do. A diversity of information, and take the time to understand it.
That's fantastic.
And I also, one other quick thing, I think it's also important when it comes to your medical care and healthcare that you consider the idea of a healthcare roundtable. What that means is you don't just have one doctor you're dependent upon. I mean, okay, unless the doctor's like totally outside of the system or something, but you need the idea of a round table. Do you remember like the King Arthur?
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. The reason the table is round is it puts everyone on the same level of equality, because King Arthur didn't want to be viewed. He didn't want to get advice from people who were treating him like a king. He wanted to hear the straight scoop. And so you want to, so you have your regular pediatrician. You may want some kind of alternative healthcare provider, ideally someone who was born outside of the United States and was trained, at least in part, outside of the United States, so they have a whole different perspective. Because the vast majority of doctors, I mean, they're just going to be average, right? Just like anyone, just like software developers or accountants, 95% are going to be average. Average people just, barely educate themselves, or they'll just do what the CDC tells them. You want people with outside perspectives in order that you can get the very best multi-dimensional advice.
Sure. And we do this with serious diseases, like getting a second opinion, right? Or a third opinion, like
more than a second. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
You get it for all kinds. I mean, for some of the most important decisions in your life, you
Yeah.
probably talk to a couple people,
Yeah.
or think about your, like, the people you admire the most, like whoever your heroes are. Do you think they put all their trust into just one person for one thing? I highly doubt that.
Yeah.
I mean,
agree.
Abraham Lincoln had his team of rivals, right? He got advice from many different people, including those who opposed him.
Not easy to do, but
No, but
highly valuable.
We have to do it because, I took, going back, my favorite college professor, and boy, that'd be wild if he was listening to this, because his name's Professor McClure from Syracuse University. I love this guy.
OSU.
He's orange, man. As my microphone turns orange for a second, right? He had this advanced seminar I took called Professionalism and Democracy, and it was all about the great threat to democracy from a society of experts. Okay, and one of the things he suggested we do, in this seminar, was the next time you see your doctor, don't call him, Dr. Smith. Just say, "Hey, Bob, how's it going?" and watch their response. And begin in your life insisting on equality with experts.
Wow.
Yes.
That's powerful advice.
Yeah, because experts tend to think they know best. They start thinking they know best in their field. But now what we're seeing with COVID and the public health officials, they think they know best for policy, for how, what everyone needs to do in every minute of their lives. And they've been empowered to do this. And it's just absolutely tyrannical, because the thing is, they don't know best. What we really needed, and this is like, this is almost like an ideal dream of democracy, right? But what we needed to do was to have the public health officials have debates in our legislatures that the public could hear, so we could have their view of what needs to be done and have it opposed.
Wow.
And so there's open discussion on it, and then have politicians be on the hook to decide, not governors issuing emergency orders and being tyrants.
Well, on that, I think there's a good spot to just ask you what's next. And people are going to hear this, see this, and then they're going to travel over to VaxCalc and take a look at it. And what's next in terms of product development? Is there anything you want to say in terms of what's on the horizon? Obviously, some people don't know this, but especially with software, there's a fairly well-known philosophy that you want to get a minimum viable product out there and then iterate on it and just improve based on what the market says, and be agile. Where are you in that process? What's next for VaxCalc?
Right. The next big thing, and it's going to take a little while. Probably won't see it until 2022, is to create like a high level vaccination planner, so that parents can map out like the full course of vaccines and make it be easy to kind of spread them out. And they can even go in and work with their doctors and talk about what would work best. So instead of going in and just saying, "Oh yeah, your child's going to get like 6 or 7 different shots," like, well, what if we spread it out like this, and we can still kind of meet it by this particular date. It'll provide great flexibility that way. Because one of the hardest things to do now is to plan the vaccinations, because there's so many, they're so complex, and you don't know what your options are. Like, the planner will show you, like, based on the state you live, the difference between the CDC full schedule and what the school system requires for entry. And but 98% of the time, you don't need the CDC full schedule. So right there, you can cut some out.
Wow.
And it'll help you create a slower approach if that's what you're committed to.
Who do you want to hear from? Obviously, potential customers, parents, they can join the forum, they can add their voice to this story.
Right.
Who are some other people that you would like to have reach out to you? Doctors,
anyone,
professionals,
anyone. I like, one thing I was thinking I don't know how I do. I'm not good with the podcast stuff, but it's almost like we need some kind of podcast where we have people who are in a state of great fear. Okay. Like, and they've had tragedy from COVID. They're in great fear of COVID. They think everyone needs to be vaccinated. And then other people too, who have intense fear of, like, there's no way I'm taking that. And just get into the practice of being able just to hear the other person and not try to reason with them, not try to convince them, but just to acknowledge what they're going through and what they're feeling, and put that out for people to hear, because that's like the one thing that's completely and totally missing. I invite anyone who feels strongly in opposition to what we've been talking about to reach out. I actually invited some reporter from the Washington Post to come into the VaxCalc forum, because she wrote the most hideous article about just the danger of your own choices, right? And I saw her email and I invited her. I said, look, why don't you just come in and meet these people who you're so scared of and angry about? Because we got a few hundred of them. We could have a dialogue. And never heard from her. Because right. Because they don't, it's really more propaganda. They don't want a dialogue, but there are people out there who want to see a dialogue. And that's really that's where the healing and the ability, that's where the strengthening of democracy actually begins, is just with 2 or 3 people
to not be threatened to listen. And
yes.
To have a conversation.
Yes. Just to hear one another.
Yeah. Yeah. That's powerful to be able to have the strength and resolve and resilience, and just understand you're not fragile, to hear things and to actually go into that mind space with someone else and say, what is their perspective? What do they see?
Yes.
And I appreciate you doing that with me today. We're probably more aligned than we're not aligned.
Right.
But in many ways, any kind of conversation that's actually trying to actively seek truth it must be willing to have that courage and humility. To me, that feels like the magic 1-2 combo punch, is that you have to have courage and humility. With courage, you'll act, right? With humility, you'll learn, right?
Yes.
So with that, I just want to say a big thank you to you for being our number one on the Story Acceleration podcast.
I'm so honored, Jed.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. I mean, the time has flown by, and I knew it would. This is really great. So we call it, just so because this is episode 1, I just want to inform our listeners and viewers, Story Acceleration, story by its nature is an accelerator. If I'm gonna tell you a story about a movie that I watched that was amazing, it may actually accelerate. It has influence. It may accelerate you to go watch that. If I tell you about a product that was terrible, that story may actually negatively accelerate that company. It's like loss of sales or something like that. Story is very, very, very powerful. And we have seen incredible growth in companies and organizations and individuals who embrace the power of story and actually leverage it. People who want to grow, right? That's the ultimate story, is personal growth. And so
I can testify just from talking with you for a few hours, you were really able to elicit my own story, because I've always kind of struggled and stumbled in that, because it's easy to get too complex and just, you know what I mean? In the story score, right? That assessment that your company offers on the website. I mean, that's how I found you. And I took it out of great curiosity, because I was thinking, the score is probably going to be low. I want to see the areas that I'm like worst in, and it was super helpful.
Well, thank you for the plug. I wasn't even going to go there, but I was just going to say this podcast is all about talking through those stories where people experienced great opposition, great challenge, but then also had breakthrough. And I believe that you are in the midst of great breakthrough with what you're offering here. I don't think it's going to be without challenge. I know that you know that. And you said you've dedicated your life to this problem, which is amazing. My hat's off to you. I think it's awesome. I stand up for freedom and for personal choice, and you're offering a tool that is exactly for that. So thanks for joining me. And I hope everybody goes checks out your product. And just rest assured, everyone that goes and looks at it, it will go through iterations. It will become easier to use, but there is a lot of great, valuable information in there for those who are willing to dig.
Yes. And anyone that sends me an email, I answer everybody.
How do they get a hold of you, Chris?
Chris@vaxcalc.org.
Perfect. And with that, we're signing off, everybody. Thank you.